Dr. Jen Walker, your resident animal welfare champion and chief animal law officer of Kinder Ground.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kate Barger, a globetrotting poultry vet who's passionate about welfare.
And hi, I'm Dr. Allison Pullen, an assistant professor and researcher for animal welfare at North Carolina State University.
And we are not pecking around. We are here for real talk on animal welfare and the science shaping the poultry industry and beyond. Welcome back, everyone. If you are hearing our voices, you have made it to episode 2 of What the Cluck. If you are new to poultry like I am and you missed episode 1, you might want to check out episode 1 and touch base with this one later. In episode 1, Pete and Allison walked us through the differences between birds raised for meat versus eggs, introduced us to the science of animal welfare, and even explained to me why baby chicks all start out yellow. What the cluck? I had no idea. All right. I feel smarter already, and we're only on our second episode, and I have so many more questions. But on today's episode, we're going to chat about the housing and husbandry of broilers and dip our toes to dive into some of the research folks like Allison are doing to promote better welfare from behavior to lighting and even how they're walking. So where should we start? I am a Princess Bride fan. So if you haven't seen that movie, you have to watch it. And if you've seen it, you'll remember when Indigo says, we go back to the beginning. So I think we should just start at the beginning. Not like the beginning of what came first, the chicken or the egg, but like big picture. How does this all come together? The housing and husbandry of broilers. Again, I'm a dairy chick. Dairies come in all shapes and sizes, but the principles are the same. So I feel like in broilers, there's less variation in how they're raised. But I have no idea. I'm making assumptions here. You guys are here to clear the fog and set me straight. So Kate, help me understand sort of the basics of broiler housing and how it's all set up. I know that's a big topic.
It is a huge
we
topic.
We only have 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a huge topic. And you're right, just like dairies, there are so many different types of farms and different types of housing. And a lot of times it varies based on the country and the infrastructure. And even climate has a huge impact on the type of housing that's needed to make sure that we're taking the best care of the broilers and optimizing their welfare. But the one thing that's really common, if you want to call it the common thread, is that broiler chicks hatch in a hatchery. Well, I should say that caveat. Typically, they hatch in a hatchery. They are then transported on a special truck in boxes to a farm on the same day that they hatch. They are grown on that farm, and then they are caught and transported in a special truck to the processing plant where they will be slaughtered. The thing that's really kind of interesting about the broiler industry is that's the way we've been doing it for probably 4+ decades for the most part. And now in the last probably 8 to 10 years, we're even looking at something called on-farm hatching, where the eggs are kept in the hatchery for a while, and then they go to the farm where the chicks actually hatch out of the shell on the farm. And those eggs are usually transported about the last 3 days of the 21-day incubation process. So that's a whole new thing that's revolutionizing how we think about what chicks need and really what's best for the welfare of chicks. But let's go back to the standard thing where we have a hatchery, we have a farm, and then we have the processing plant. The thing that changes is that farm part. So birds are going to be cared for 24/7 on that farm, but that farm may be 100,000 plus broilers with 8 to 10 houses, or it may just be 2 to 4 houses with, let's say, 50,000 to 80,000 birds. That's where it's really going to vary. And then country to country, it may be a solid house with solid walls and completely automated ventilation. It may be curtain sided, where they drop the curtains to use the prevalent winds. Or we may even have birds that sort of live in this sort of middle ground where they have a house and then they have pop holes or an access point where they can go outside to either protected sort of patio type range like we might see in Europe, or even outdoor access. So we can find a lot of different varieties there in that middle section on the farm. And then how long the birds are on that farm also varies based on the market weight or the age that the company wants. So sometimes they're on the farm for as few as 30 to 35 days, and sometimes they're on the farm for about 60 days before they are transported and taken to market. So we've got lots of variability. In some countries, we even have multi-level barns where maybe they can't go out, but those birds are actually kept on different floors. We sometimes see that in Canada and parts of Asia. And so that's a completely different type of farming than what we might even see here in parts of North America, in the US or in Europe, for example, where birds are typically on all kept on the floor on just on one level. So lots of different varieties, and I look forward to talking with you and having Allison jump in here as well.
Awesome. Okay. I'm again, so many questions coming. I had no idea that there was that much variety, to be honest. I think I oversimplified it as I tend to do. And I'm going to do it again though. So I'm going to oversimplify it, but I think this will help us kind of start really broad and then peck a little on further episodes and get that deeper dive on specific topics. But we think about animal welfare and you mentioned the workers and the different housing. What are some key husbandry inputs when we think about these systems and then differences in the system that Kate described, but how it relates to welfare? Like, because you talked about curtains raising and automatic errors stuff. So yeah, let's maybe touch on those and get an idea of sort of what's all involved because I feel like it's complicated again.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Kate did a great job explaining all these different types of housing systems that broilers can be in. And I would say across those housing systems, we do see a few consistent key inputs that we want to, I guess, really implement across those housing systems. So one is going to be a lighting program. And so, lighting is actually can be very complicated, but I would say that some of the key factors around that lighting program is thinking about how many hours of light and how many hours of dark do the birds have access to, and particularly even at different stages of their life, as well as the intensity of that light. So that's a big one. Lighting, ventilation is another big one. So thinking about the temperature of the barn, how do we create ideal brooding temperatures when we still see those yellow fluffy chicks that don't have as good of ability to thermoregulate on their own? So how do we, achieve good brooding temperatures? And then once they get out of that sort of sensitive phase, get into a good temperature range in the barn so that the birds are not experiencing heat stress or cold stress. We want to also think about humidity and ammonia that we can manage with that ventilation, because if we start to get a lot of moisture buildup in the barn, we can see moist litter, which I'll address in a second, but that can also lead to higher ammonia levels, which could lead to respiratory diseases for the birds. Your litter is really going to be your flooring for the birds. So thinking about that litter input, we really want to see dry, friable or loose litter substrate there on the floor. We also want to think about our stocking density, so our bird input. So how many pounds of birds do we have per square foot in that barn? Because if we get to too high of a stocking density, we can also see consequences for the litter quality and the air quality in the barn. Feed and water systems are another big input. So making sure that birds have easy access to ad libitum feed and good quality drinking water, that those are at an appropriate height that the birds can actually reach and consume from. Biosecurity is another big input. We talk about that across all aspects of the barnyard and all of our different animal species, but really making sure that we have a good, robust biosecurity program so that we can be proactive about protecting the bird's health. And then I think the last key input I would say it would be our stock person training and animal monitoring. So making sure that we have really knowledgeable caretakers that are routinely monitoring the birds and equipment so that they can, readily notice any issues and correct those if things are not going well.
Awesome. Amazingly similar. Not that everything's about cows, but I'm starting to see a lot of overlap. So There's a lot going on, and I think probably a bit more complicated than I had realized from just the more diversity in the systems than I thought, and really all of the things that you're looking at. Because when I start thinking about the ventilation and the lighting and litter and all of that, that has to come into play. And water, we got to make sure they have water, and then water makes the litter wet, and all of these things that I'm imagining that you're going to have to tell me how you guys manage all of these things. Um, uh, so yeah, a lot of I feel like those are a lot of specialized units or function. And really even in the best systems, any system, things are ever rarely ever perfect. And with all this going on, how do we know, or how do we ensure that those inputs are actually doing what they're supposed to do? And one of those things is to give the birds good welfare, besides, all the other things. They're multi-functional items that we're getting at. So tell me more about that. Like, how do we know? We just assume, like, they look good.
Yeah, no, I think, Allison did a great job, Jen, covering the inputs. So all the things that we want to have in place, whether that's the program or the equipment, um, all the specifications have to be there to make sure the birds have a really good quality life, have good health, and really what I focus on a lot in my role as a veterinarian, as somebody providing welfare expertise to companies around the world, is really helping them understand what they can measure as far as output. So we can have the perfect lighting program, the perfect type of bulbs, intensity, light hours, dark hours, as Allison mentioned, but we really want to say and measure and monitor how that lighting program impacts the welfare of the birds. So what is their behavior? What are those things that we can measure and manage and monitor on a regular basis? So I call that my 3 M's of welfare. So we want to look at indicators that we can monitor. We want to look at indicators that we can measure very objectively. So if you and I and Allison all go to a farm, we can all say, hey, let's monitor footpad quality, for example, or pododermatitis. We all have a explicit way that we would monitor that and we would score that. And that's the outcome of that input, which is the ventilation, the litter quality, the activity, the health of the bird, as Allison mentioned. So those key welfare indicators are really specific things that we can monitor, measure, and then we can manage. So if we're not achieving the goals that we want, we look back and we say, okay, well, what inputs do we need to change? Do we need to improve our ventilation? Or do we need to take a look at that stocking density? Or is it something with the gut health of the bird, or maybe the nutrition or the water system maintenance? All of that can impact one single factor like that footpad lesion or the footpad condition. So, where do we go from there? I think that's the real focus of the industry right now. Is every company has their little tweaks and their things that they're doing around health programs and biosecurity programs and the size of the farms or the stocking density, the breeds that they're using, the nutrition that they use. But we can all routinely measure those key welfare indicators. There are a few of them that we can measure at the farm, like Allison said, like air quality, looking at parts per million of ammonia, or we can look at litter quality. But then there are a lot that we are measuring right now at the processing plant as sort of that final outcome, looking at the skin condition of the birds, looking at are there injuries or bruising of the birds that have resulted from the farm or maybe from the transport. And then we also look at things like the mobility of the birds. So I know, Jen, you focus a lot on lameness for dairy cattle. Well, we focus on that as well for broilers. And we want to make sure that those birds can walk and stand and maneuver really well to get to that feed and water that's fully accessible 24 hours a day, so that they can have a good life and they can drink when they want to drink and they can eat when they want to eat. And that we are trying to optimize their health by having the best livability possible, but also making the right decisions for birds that maybe don't meet our quality or our welfare standards.
Awesome. I hate to say, I think I've already stumbled on a dumb question again. It's my forte. So you've both mentioned litter. Um, and I think my whole entire life I've confused litter. And then there's scratch. So there's chicken scratch. And so do chickens have litter that they scratch, or do chickens actually scratch? And when we say scratch, do we mean like I'm obsessed with scratching because we're doing some pig projects with Kinder Ground where we're giving pigs brushes. Amazing. Turns out everybody wants to itch. So just to clear it up, so it's not going to bug me and distract me the rest of the episode. Scratch, litter or scratching? What is it? Help me out.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. And again, there are no dumb questions. So I'm really glad that you brought this up. Yeah, so sometimes that litter area is referred to as the scratch area. And so when birds or when chickens perform foraging behavior, which is we consider one of the highly motivated species specific behaviors of chickens, when they perform their foraging behavior, they'll actually take their feet and scratch around at the ground to move that litter around and then peck at the ground. And that's one of their ways that they explore their environment and sort of get more information about their environment. And so, depending on breed and life stage, I mean, chickens can spend quite a bit of their day actually performing this foraging behavior. So they'll do that scratching behavior in the scratch or litter area. They also may use that litter area to dust bathe, which is where they'll actually sort of use their feet to kind of dig a little hole, and then they'll lay down in that hole and actually rub their feathers all around in the litter, and then they'll kind of rake that through their feathers and stand up and shake it all out. And that's a way for chickens to actually remove extra oils and fats from their feathers that helps them maintain their feather structure and their feather condition. And having good feather condition is really important for them to be able to thermoregulate. As far as chickens scratching themselves, sometimes they will also use their beaks to preen. So they'll kind of rake their beaks through their feathers to help also maintain that feather structure or feather condition. So that's really what I kind of think of when I think of chickens scratching. Yeah, so that's how I would address
Some.
that.
I love that. That helps. Now I'm less confused. I had it backwards. Tell you. Um, and don't blame this on my like vet school training. I'm sure they told us, and I don't know. I don't know what I was doing. I was obsessing over cows, and I wasn't paying attention. All right. So I think from this, my takeaway is we're going to have to plan on doing some serious pecking at these key welfare indicators. I think what I've always just thought of as general outcome measures, but I like that idea that we're identifying key welfare indicators that are really those outcome measures that are specific to those species. So I think we're going to plan that for future episodes, folks. So stay tuned. Make sure you follow us. And really understanding, I think, that there is a lot of animal welfare science that supports all of it, and how we make those decisions and really dive deep into how we came about those. But to get us warmed up, to get like a little teaser, and get us incubating some of those welfare concepts, I'm curious, what kinds of things are we thinking about when it comes to animal welfare and animal welfare indicators, even if you think about the future of where we're going next, just to get people just kind of opening their minds to all the things we can talk about when it comes to birds and welfare.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting to see these key welfare indicators that are, I mean, have some of these have historically been used in broiler welfare research for a long time, and then we're just seeing them increasingly used more and more in research, and kind of even broadening the types of indicators that are used in research. To be able to evaluate different management programs like lighting or environmental enrichments or stocking density. I can give you kind of a quick case study from my lab where we were looking at indoor and outdoor access housing systems for broilers, and really trying to, get some evidence-based information about, do we see welfare trade-offs in these systems? And so we use these key welfare indicators and comparing sort of a conventional indoor environment to an outdoor silvopasture environment, which is where there's a lot of trees integrated on the outdoor range with the birds. And a lot of folks I think a lot of folks, at least in my conversations, just think outdoor access must be better, for the birds, because they're getting outside, they're getting this fresh air, they have this, more complex environment to be in. But when we ran our study and looked at these key welfare indicators, we did see that, from a behavior standpoint, we did see more active behaviors and a bigger diversity of behaviors outdoors. So we saw more walking, more foraging. We saw the birds doing this play behavior called sparring, which is sort of a kind of fake fighting. They don't actually land beaks on each other or attack, but it's almost kind of this play behavior where they'll chase each other and do this sparring. So we saw more of that outdoors. But when we get into our other more traditional key welfare indicators, we saw that the outdoor birds also had worse foot pads. So they had more foot pad dermatitis than the indoor birds. They had higher mortality, and they also had worse average daily gain for their body weight and a worse feed conversion ratio. So sort of worse growth and development when they were outside. And then what a key welfare indicator we kind of use in the research world is thinking about corticosterone. So that's like we talk about cortisol a lot in mammals and humans, and corticosterone is sort of the equivalent of that in birds. And we actually saw higher feather corticosterone, which indicates more chronic stress in those outdoor birds. So that was a way for us to actually get multiple indicators that the welfare was not as good outside as it was in that indoor environment. And we think one of the main reasons for that is because you have so much less control over that outdoor environment, of course, in an indoor environment. And we had a really huge rainstorm come through during the time that we had that study that made the ground really wet and dropped temperatures colder. And so our outdoor birds were really feeling that stressor, whereas our indoor birds were able to stay comfy in their with their ventilation and in their environment that had much better thermoregulation and was drier. So that was a way that we were able to really use those key welfare indicators to give us actual evidence about the welfare of those birds across behavior, health, and what we can even infer about the bird's mental or affective state from that stress hormone.
That's amazing. So really, it's nuanced then, right? So really understanding and really looking at ways to instead of just writing down like here's what good welfare looks like, to go to the birds and essentially let the birds tell us, right? Ask the birds how they're doing in those systems, because it's dependent on so many things coming together. Like you could design the best system or whatever, and I think we come to these with some internal biases, some biases of like what our previous experiences have been to that. So I think I think that was the article that I think I read that kind of got me started on this whole thing. Where I was like, my mind blown. Like, what? I thought this was perfect, right? So I think that really hones in on that and the importance about talking about the key welfare indicators, or the KWIs, if we like to be cool and abbreviate it. Kate, what are you seeing as far as like how that's how Kate's using it to study and research. And I think we'll dig into this later, but just to touch on maybe how are you taking that as the poultry industry, and where do they come in on your side of the barn, and how you apply those in practice beyond the research?
So, Jen, you mentioned we really need to sort of try to eliminate our biases and what we think the birds want or need, and really focuses on what the birds are telling us that they want and need. And I think Allison's research is a classic example of, we think the birds would prefer this one, but actually based on their stress levels, based on some key welfare indicators that we can measure, and their health status, it was actually maybe not the best model for them, or at least at that time of the year. And I think that's something we are looking at in the global poultry industry, is that model that maybe works in Northern and Western Europe maybe isn't going to work as well in Central America, or maybe doesn't work as well in the western part of the US or the eastern part of the US, or maybe isn't going to work in China, because there are other climatic pressures, there are other disease pressures, there are just different types of management, as I mentioned, the different times or lengths of time that those birds will be on the farm. So I think from a real practical boots on the ground, if you will, what's going on in the barnyard, on the practical level around the world, I think we are really trying to figure out how we can optimize the housing to meet the bird needs. We know that the genetics are continuing to improve and change, and the birds are becoming more and more efficient. So if I think about back in the dark ages when I started in the poultry industry, where we didn't have as much automation. Now it's much more common to see automation. So we have maybe in a modern poultry barn, we have 5 sensors. And so those fans are constantly coming on or off, and the ventilation is changing to maintain that set point for those birds. So it's almost like we think about the Nest thermostat that many of us have in our houses, and we say, hey, regardless of whether it's hot or cold, we want to maintain this temperature. And that's what that controller's doing. And so that's helping us manage that environment that's best for the birds. But there are other things. Camera technology, I think, is really cool. I work with a researcher from Oxford University in the UK named Dr. Marion Dawkins, and she's developed some amazing technology that actually uses cameras in barns, not to specifically look at individual chickens per se, but more to look at the birds' movement and their distribution and their activity level. And she can then convert that to an algorithm and then sort of a dashboard, if you will, on telling us, do the birds move and is their activity what I would expect for a day 3 old or 3 day old bird? And is this bird within the range for what I want to see? So I think we will continue to see more and more of that type of automated technology coming into farms and hatcheries and even into processing plants that will allow us to measure many, many more birds from a key welfare indicator and really give us an idea, particularly on the farm, what's happening when the lights are on and what's happening even when it's dark. So that way we have much better precision and much better understanding of bird needs or even what's challenging the birds in the environment. And so that to me is a really cool thing that I see coming in the future as technology continues to be incorporated into what we're doing on farms.
Awesome. I love that. And again, it just brings back that importance of figuring out how to take the science, because there's so much amazing science, and bring that together and executing it on farm. How do we make that and implement that on the farm side? So we're getting close to wrapping up for our time. I think from what you guys, because it kept coming up a little bit more, how about we talk about our first key welfare indicator on the next episode and really focus on foot pad lesions, because we talked about lameness, and I'm big on lameness. And so, in cows. So that'll be good. How about that for the next topics? I think folks are going to have to clear their schedules because we have so much to talk about. But we can have a teaser that we're going to talk about foot pad lesions. But I do, before we close out, I have my dumb question. So we talked about eggs last time. We talked brown chickens and white chickens. And we mentioned the brown egg, white egg thing. But I have I think, and you mentioned bias. So I have a bias. I learned that my dad has a bias of white eggs. He doesn't like brown eggs. I bought some brown eggs and he was like, grr. And I was like, what do you have against brown eggs? I don't like, are they different? I don't even know. Like, maybe I'm not perceiving something. Is there something different about brown eggs and white eggs? I just, yeah, I have no idea. And sometimes when I go to the egg section, it's overwhelming, quite frankly. There's so many choices. I don't know how you do this. Are they all coming from different types of chickens, like the regular size, big size, and then brown and white? I don't know. Clearly, there's some biases out there. I didn't know there was a difference, really, to be honest. Teach me about some eggs, Kate.
So I think it would be amazing to have another episode purely dedicated to eggs and maybe a little bit with the chickens that produce those eggs. But there's so many different marketing claims and different types of eggs and sizes of eggs and how the eggs are presented. We could talk for many episodes about eggs. But to simplify it just a little bit, if we take 5 people with different color skin and each person has a cut or a boo-boo, as
Yeah.
my daughter would
Yeah.
say, we all have the same color blood, right? So
Yeah.
regardless of what color skin we have, we all bleed the same color red blood. So eggs are pretty much the same. You can have lots of different colors of eggs from a shell standpoint. You can break them open. You're always going to find the yolk and you're going to find the albumin. And there's a thin albumin and a thick albumin, which is the white part. That's the technical word for the white
Okay.
part that you mix together. But the sizes of eggs really depend on the size of the chicken and oftentimes on the age of that chicken. So you can find what we call peewees in the industry, which are your small eggs. Those are usually going to come from your pretty young flock sources that are just coming into production. And then you get into those medium and large and sort of the jumbos. The jumbo eggs are not from jumbo chickens. Those are just a bigger egg that was produced. And so At least in the US, those are very regulated. There's actually a size range for each of those eggs. And so those would be sorted on the farm and then packaged according to the size. So that way, when you buy a package of eggs, whether it's a half dozen or a flat of 30 or whatever, you're going to hopefully get the same size eggs together. But yeah, a lot of times people have different preferences just according to what they grew up with or what they like. But an egg is an egg. When you crack them open and you put it in your frying pan to prepare breakfast, it's all going to be the same at the end of the day.
Good. I will tell my dad.
Oh,
And so we'll make sure that we're all on the same page now. That's very helpful.
and one last quick cool tip to share with your family is that the color of the yolk of the egg can depend a lot on the diet that that bird is eating. So cool fact there, in case he says, well, this one always has a brighter yolk and yours are pale yolks. You can say, Dad, it's just what the chickens are eating. So
Okay.
we'll talk about that on a future episode as well.
Okay, yeah. So we have more to talk about. That is clear. All right. So first of all, I want to thank Allison and Kate for putting up with my dumb questions. But I want to get other folks to ask questions. So it's not, I mean, it is all about me, but not really. So let's let other folks ask some questions. So send your questions into no dumb q at kinderground.org, and we're going to try to answer them in future episodes. So make sure to join us next time, and we're going to start taking a deep dive on some key welfare indicators. And I think that's a great place to start. If you like what you've seen and what we've been talking about so far, again, like, heart, clap, whatever we do these days, follow us. Until then, be curious, be kind, and we'll see you next time here at What the Cluck, because we're not pecking around. We're here for real talk on animal welfare and the science shaping the poultry industry and beyond. So follow us and come back next time.
Join the
Thanks.
flock with us next time. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.